Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Haribo. So, today on this auspicious, it's the appearance, yes, or disappearance? Appearance of Sri Jagadish Pandit is Avirbhava Mahotsav Iti. So, do we want someone to also translate Hindi side by side, or is English okay? Okay. All right. So, You don't understand English? Bear with me. I don't understand Hindi yet, so. So Jagadish Pandit was the savior of the world. He was a monsoon cloud of Krishna Prema, pouring showers of mercy upon everyone. Jagadish Pandit and his brother Hiranya lived near Jagannath Mishra in Sridham, Mayapur. One Ekadashi day, baby Nimai was crying constantly. He stopped after taking Mahaprasadam rice in Jagadish Pandit's home. Then Nimai performed a miracle. Jagadish Pandit swooned in ecstasy upon seeing baby Gauranga manifest a beautiful form with a monsoon cloud, blue complexion, shining like lightning, and adorned with a shimmering peacock feather. After moving to Sri Kshetra Dham, Jagannath Puri, Lord Gaurachandra asked Jagadish to come help spread the Harinam Sankirtan movement. Taking Lord Jagannath's permission, Jagadish Pandit took a deity of Jagannath back to Nadia to worship in his village of Yashoda. In Krishna's Nitya Leela, Jagadish Pandit serves as the dancer Chandrahasa, a Nagapatni, wife of Kaliya. So this was very interesting. Sri Jagadish Pandit was one of Kaliya serpent's wives. Very nice. We're obviously very devout in Krishna Leela, so we're certainly in Gaur Leela too. So, Sri Jagadish Pandit ki jai. Hare Krishna. So this is the book marathon still going on? It's the book marathon still going on. Hardcore. I remember when January was pretty much it, but it's nice, it's going on. So we'll read some more about book distribution. This is from the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. This is Sura Prabhu. This is, for those of you who don't know Sura Prabhu, he's I think he's like the production manager in charge in Los Angeles today. So he used to also do a lot of book distribution. He was in St. Louis for a long time and so forth. He's a very jolly devotee. I think a former boxer too. So very tough as well. So Sura, Vaisheshika was selling books in the airport with me. He would walk up to people and say, "Well, how are you doing, sir? All glories to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan movement, the prime benediction for humanity at large, which cleanses the heart." He was repeating the Shikshastika prayers of Lord Chaitanya right out of the book, and yet he was selling books. The books had pictures of Krishna and devotional scenes on the cover, and sometimes some devotees couldn't understand how people could relate to these books. But Prabhupada wanted them distributed, and he was saying that we should preach on the merit of the book. When a devotee asked Prabhupada what we should say to distribute the books, Prabhupada replied, "Krishne sva dhammopagate," which is the verse that says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just to give people religion in this age of darkness. So we were also repeating that verse and distributing books on faith. We would go out and see the people actually becoming struck by Krishna consciousness. They would see that the devotees were very sincere and serious, and they would become impressed. Daily on Sankirtana, we would see people appreciating Srila Prabhupada's books. There was also harassment, but Prabhupada had talked about it and that there was always difficulty. So everything was there from Prabhupada to confirm whatever realizations we had. Srila Prabhupada said a book salesman would sometimes have difficulty because he'll be sometimes accepted and sometimes rejected, but he tolerates. In the airport, we met professors, lawyers, all kinds of people who would stop and talk. They would challenge, and we would constantly have to defend Prabhupada's books and his movement and speak up on behalf of Prabhupada, more so than when we were just kids out on the parking lots talking to women and begging 50 cents for a pack of incense. We were presenting Prabhupada's books to the scholars, coming into contact with Mayavadis, scientists, businessmen who were very sharp in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and San Diego. People were very sharp and hard. And just by having to spiritually combat them and defend the movement, we become more mature in our understanding of Prabhupada's books and how to present them in such a way that we could convince even people who didn't want to be convinced. We had to study Prabhupada's books. So that was Sri Prabhu's recollection of book distribution at the time. Actually, there's a nice purport in Bhagavatam in the first canto where Prabhupada is talking about hearing and explaining. That he says that more important than reading books is actually hearing and explaining. So by that way, one can become one actually solidifies and becomes expert in the subject matter. So if also too, just from having been a book distributor in the United States myself, I can say that if one ever gets a chance to do book distribution, there are many book distributors here, if one gets a chance to do book distribution in America, other Western countries, please do so. Here in India, it's maybe a little bit easy to distribute books because everybody has reverence for Bhagavad Gita. Says, oh yes, Bhagavad Gita is very nice. But not so in the Western countries. It's literally a hard sell. You have to be on top of it. And so, continuing on. In 1974, several new parties formed just for distributing books. Tripurari had been traveling as an emissary from Los Angeles, but now, with Srila Prabhupada's permission, he formed a Bhaktivedanta book trust, a Sankirtan party of some leading book distributors. The BBT distributors stationed themselves in various airports around the country, creating a significant increase in book distribution. Quote, "Your entire program is approved by me," unquote, Prabhupada wrote to Tripurari. When Tripurari asked if he could take sannyas, Prabhupada replied that he was already doing more than any sannyasi. In one letter, Prabhupada called him the incarnation of book distribution. Book distribution took another great stride forward when Tamal Krishna Goswami, Srila Prabhupada's zonal acharya in India for 4 years, returned to the U.S. Joining with his friend Vishnu Jana Swami, he helped form the Radha Damodar Sankirtan Party, traveling in a bus with Radha Krishna deities to distribute books and hold festivals all over the U.S. Tamal Krishna Goswami. When we first began the Radha Damodar Party, our idea was to make as many devotees as possible by holding festivals at which we chanted Hare Krishna and distributed prasadam. After Krishna sent so many nice young men, it was difficult to keep them always engaged. Then suddenly, a letter arrived from Srila Prabhupada in which he said that the kirtan of book distribution was better than the kirtan of public chanting. This transcendental instruction changed the course of our Radha Damodar party. From then on, I concentrated more and more on book distribution, and this gave Prabhupada greater and greater pleasure. I had been in India for 4 years, but our main program had been enrolling life members. But now I was in America. Srila Prabhupada was reminding me that preaching meant to distribute his books. So I became inspired that our party should distribute so many books that it equal all the other book distribution of the rest of Iskcon worldwide. Day and night, I was thinking of how to get out more and more books, and thus overflood America with transcendental literature. Srila Prabhupada wrote me that this was his real ambition, to turn all America into Vaishnavas. Until we formed a Radha Damodar party, the method of distributing books had been that an individual would be given either a large, medium, or small book, according to the size of the donation. But Prabhupada told me that all types of book distribution, to distribute as large books was most important. So I was always considering how to increase the number of large books. The problem was that people were willing to give small donations, but rarely would they give us large enough contributions to award giving them a large book. Then Krishna gave me the idea that by adding together a few small donations from a number of persons, at least one of them could be given a large book, while the others could be given a Back to Godhead magazine or a small book. By this method, we were able to increase the distribution of big books tremendously. Prabhupada fully approved of this idea. As long as the book fund received payment for the books, Srila Prabhupada allowed us to pass them out as quickly as we could, irrespective of the size of the donation. Thus, our Radha Damodar party was able to distribute as many as 50,000 big books in a single month. That's Tamal Krishna Maharaj's testimony. Just one thing I'd like to mention, that the Back to Godhead magazine was a staple of the book distribution. So today, the Back to Godhead magazine is, at least in the United States and other Western countries, is more of a congregational magazine, and it's still a very important contribution to the growth of the Sankirtan movement. However, back then, the Back to Godhead magazines were more topical. They would address, present issues, certain hot burning topics, and it was actually a very provocative kind of magazine too. So I remember there's on the back cover there's a picture of an older man looking at a young boy, and with a caption that said, "If you cannot tell him about the facts of life, then you're in trouble." So that kind of provocativeness. So any kind of literature that can address that can address the that kind of like topical subjects is also very welcome. So there's a space for that in the growth and distribution of the Sankirtan movement. So, continuing further, Srila Prabhupada showed special interest in the Radha Damodar party and approved loans from the BBT for the purchase of more buses, thus creating a Sankirtan army traveling in renovated Greyhound buses. By the end of the 1974, the Radha Damodar party had 3 buses, vans, and numerous men. Prabhupada called the buses moving temples and urged the Radha Damodar devotees to continue their program with certainty that they were pleasing Lord Chaitanya. Quote, "I am glad that you have understood the importance of my books," Prabhupada wrote. "Therefore, I am stressing it so much. Let everyone take these books." Srila Prabhupada encouraged the Radha Damodar party to expand to hundreds of buses and thus fulfill the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to bring Krishna consciousness to every town and village. When a tight transcendental competition arose between the Los Angeles Temple, Tripurari's BBT party, and the Radha Damodar party, Prabhupada watched and approved it with pleasure. That has to be one of the most historic competitions in Iskcon ever, in the book distribution. My comment. Another party forming in 1974 was the BBT Library Party. It began with Hridayananda Goswami sending some brahmacharis from his traveling party to visit prestigious universities in New England. The men attempted to sell entire sets of Srila Prabhupada's books to the professors, and even in their first attempts they met with great success. Srila Prabhupada had long cherished the idea that even before coming to America, he had gone to libraries in India with copies of the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto. By his efforts in New Delhi, the United States Library of Congress had obtained copies of those early volumes. Now his desire to see his books placed in all the U.S. libraries and universities was becoming a reality. Within a few months, professors began writing favorable reviews, and some even ordered Prabhupada's books for their college courses. I very much like this program of the standing orders, Prabhupada wrote. Try to increase it up to 50,000 such orders from the libraries. Another party that formed in 1974 was Namhata, a group of brahmacharis led by two sannyasis. The Namhata party would travel and distribute books, donating their profits toward Srila Prabhupada's projects in Bombay, Mayapur, and Vrindavan. When Srila Prabhupada became ill for several weeks in September of 1974, the book distribution reports were his best medicine. Whenever I get report of my book selling, he wrote to the library party, I feel strength. Even now, in this weekend condition, I have got strength from your report. And during the same illness, he wrote to Rameshwara, regarding book sales figures, please endeavor in this way. This is the only solace in my life. When I hear that my books are selling so nicely, I become energetic like a young man. Srila Prabhupada recovered his health, and by the end of 1974, his BBT was also in extraordinary health. With the temples again competing in a furious Christmas marathon in America, the BBT reported to Prabhupada that approximately 387,000 hardbound books had been sold during the year, a 67% increase over the previous year, and almost 4 million Back to Godheads had been sold, an 89% increase. The American BBT sold the individual temple a total of 6,668,000 pieces of literature, a 60% increase. Such news made Prabhupada become energetic like a young man, and Prabhupada and his book distribution movement headed into 1975 with all the signs of increasing, doubling, and tripling, as already astounding figures of 1974. Those figures even today are very impressive, aren't they? It's quite amazing how this all took off within just that short amount of time. Srila Prabhupada had created his Bhaktivedanta Book Trust in 1972 as an independent entity to ensure that his books could continue being produced and distributed. The BBT would operate exclusively for the benefit of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and yet it would exist independently. The trust document stated that the trustees should divide the money from the sale of the books to Iskcon temples into two funds, one for printing books and one for purchasing Iskcon properties and building temples. Prabhupada believed that if this 50-50 formula were followed, Krishna would assure the success of Iskcon. Repeatedly, he would refer to this formula in conversations and letters, even in his purports on Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada gave his BBT trustees authority to make printing plans, and the trustees would then consult him for approval. He would set the standards and guidelines for his BBT trustees to follow. Only after consulting him could they institute changes. And to changes, Prabhupada was particularly averse. He would choose the book size, determine the artwork, and make suggestions about the size of a particular printing, about shipping policies and sales to temples, almost every aspect of the BBT's publishing activities. Even when certain temples did not remit their payments to the BBT, Prabhupada would become involved. Quote, "It is not good if such big temples who are setting the example for the whole society do not pay their bills. This is most irregular. I am trying to retire from the administrative affairs, but if the presidents and GBC men make such disturbances, then how can I be peaceful? These things should be maintained automatically. Then it will be peaceful for me." He was a strict manager. According to the Vedic instruction, he said, fire, debt, and disease should never be neglected. They must be extinguished by all means. Srila Prabhupada saw book distribution as, among other things, the basis for an economically sound Iskcon. Other businesses could also operate, but book selling was the best, for it combined preaching with a good source of income. As he wrote to one of his temple presidents, "I am very encouraged by the report of how nicely our books are being distributed. This is our main business all over the world, and if you give full attention to this, there will never be any shortage of funds." And on another occasion, regarding the society's leaders emphasizing business, you should understand what is the meaning of business. Business means to help the preaching. Preaching needs financial help, otherwise we have no need for business. So far as I understand, our book business is sufficient to support our movement. Srila Prabhupada also oversaw all BBT loans to temples. Any GBC secretary or temple president requesting a loan would have to approach him. In 1973 and 1974, he granted sizable loans for building, purchasing, or improving temples in Dallas, Hawaii, Sydney, Chicago, and Vancouver. He also granted a loan to the Radha Damodar party for buying traveling temples or buses, and one to South America for printing books. Kirtanananda Maharaj automatically received a $50,000 loan each year for New Vrindavan. But Prabhupada would deny money requests for projects he considered inconsistent with the purposes of the BBT. On November 6th, he wrote to Rameshwara, "No, we cannot loan BBT money for any other purposes than what is mentioned in the BBT agreement. These other loans for cows, equipment, and restaurants must all be repaid, and no other loans other than for publishing and temple construction can be granted." Beginning in 1974, Srila Prabhupada utilized the BBT profits for constructing his main temples in India, Vrindavan, Mayapur, and especially Bombay. Rameshwara informed the devotees of this special function of the BBT. Srila Prabhupada is personally overseeing all the Indian programs and spending. If 1 rupee is misspent, Srila Prabhupada becomes disturbed and chastises the devotees mercifully. This money is earned by the sweat of many devotees, so why are you not careful? Srila Prabhupada wants to see our Vrindavan temple, HG Krishna Mandir, completed by Janmashtami. Prabhupada wants to establish Sri Mayapur temple as well. One interesting note in this connection is that in India, I've been told that 10 paisa purchases 1 brick. 10 paisa means US 1 cent. So just think, every penny you collect buys 1 brick in India. Every penny counts toward these transcendental goals. Therefore, places in India, Prabhupada wrote, are spiritually potent. Or these places in India, Prabhupada wrote, are spiritually potent. By establishing temples in Mayapur and Vrindavan, we assure that the purity of our movement will be kept intact. In October of 1974, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Hamsadutta, his GBC secretary for Germany, "Whenever there is any publication in any language, it enlivens me 100 times. Although Srila Prabhupada's order from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was to preach and published in the English language, it expanded that order to include all the languages and countries of the world. Quote, "My first concern is that my book shall be published and distributed profusely all over the world," Srila Prabhupada had written to one of the first devotees in Europe in 1972. Prabhupada wrote always in English, but ever since 1968, when Iskcon had first begun spreading to other countries, he had been talking of printing his books in foreign languages. When in 1972 a German edition of Bhagavad Gita had been printed, Srila Prabhupada had written Hamsadutta, "You have done the right thing by printing Bhagavad Gita in the German language, and I very much appreciate that you have done this great service." By 1973, Sankirtan parties had been traveling throughout Germany, distributing several hundred copies of Bhagavad Gita a week. Hamsadutta had promised that he would translate 1 book a month into German, and when in the fall of 1974 Prabhupada heard of 6 recently printed German translations, he replied, "This is very happy news for me. Thank you. Overflood Europe with German books." Srila Prabhupada said that whenever he published a book, he felt that he had conquered an empire. His books were the basis of the spiritual revolution that would eventually change humanity and save it from the pernicious effects of the age of Kali Yuga. Quote, "Produce voluminously Spanish language literature," Srila Prabhupada requested. When Hridayananda Goswami had become the zonal leader for South America, Srila Prabhupada had instructed him to emphasize printing and distributing books above opening temples. Quote, I also was printing even before I had big temples in the U.S., Prabhupada had written, "So you may follow the footsteps of the previous acharyas." Hridayananda Goswami had organized the Spanish BBT in Mexico and had made book distribution his priority. Early in 1974, when the Spanish BBT was ready to print translations of Srimad Bhagavatam's first volume, Bhagavad Gita and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada wrote, "In printing these books of our Krishna conscious philosophy in so many different languages, we can actually inject our movement into the masses of persons all over the world, especially there in the Western countries, and we can literally turn the whole nations into Krishna conscious nations." When 100,000 copies of a Spanish Back to Godhead were printed, Srila Prabhupada wrote, "Now give them to everyone." Spanish book distribution became the second largest in the world next to American. Bhagavan, Srila Prabhupada's representative in Southern Europe, had been printing in French and Italian, and as early as December 1972, he had printed Prabhupada's Easy Journey to Other Planets in French. By the beginning of 1974, 3 parties in France were distributing daily 1,000 books, including a French Bhagavad Gita as it is. Already, Bhagavan had printed the first Italian Back to Godhead, and a French Sri Upanishad was forthcoming. Wherever devotees went, they knew their program was to chant Hare Krishna, follow the regulative principles, and arrange for printing and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. When the first devotees had reached South Africa, they had proceeded just according to Srila Prabhupada's desire, and he replied to them, "Your report is very encouraging to me that you distributed 110 Gitas in 2 days in Cape Town." Srila Prabhupada often thought of having his books printed in Russian, and he wrote to the Minister of Education and Culture in the USSR suggesting they publish a translation of the ancient classical Vedic literature, namely Bhagavad Gita. It is already published by the famous London publishing house of M.S.S. Macmillan Company. He also talked to his disciples about printing Russian translations in America. Whenever Srila Prabhupada met an interested person proficient in any language, he would request that person to translate his books. In 1972, he had written, "I am very encouraged to hear that Japanese language translations of some of my books will be brought out soon, because without books and magazines, what authority or what basis have we got for preaching?" Similarly, Srila Prabhupada had written to an American devotee in Indonesia, "I'm especially happy to hear that you have got a Chinese boy there who is doing some translating work. Yes, the Chinese-speaking portion of the world is very large, and it requires to infiltrate gradually, especially by distributing our literatures widely in Chinese languages. So his service is the greatest to Krishna." Later, when Prabhupada heard that the Chinese boy, Yashomati Sutta, had finished translating 3 chapters of Bhagavad Gita into Chinese, he wrote that they should be immediately print those 3 chapters as a small book. Iskcon Australia rose to prominence in the book distribution competition, and by 1974 was competing with Los Angeles, Iskcon, and the Radha Damodar Party for the world leadership. By the fall of 1974, about a dozen top Australian and New Zealand distributors were selling daily more than 20 big books each. The centers in Australia, like those in America, more than doubled their book distribution between 1973 and 1974. When book distribution had been just beginning in America in 1970, no books had been available in England. But within a year, Krishna book distribution had begun there, and Srila Prabhupada had written, "All of my disciples in London Center are very intelligent, and they should unite around this single task of selling Krishna book widely throughout Britain." By 1974, the devotees in Britain were valiantly distributing books. During one busy 6-day period, they distributed 600 volumes of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, 400 of Srimad Bhagavatam, and 1,000 Back to Godhead magazines. India was special. There, Srila Prabhupada had introduced book distribution through the Iskcon Life membership program. Wealthy Indians were more inclined to accept the books as part of an Iskcon membership package, which included such benefits as free accommodation in Iskcon temples throughout the world. But in India as elsewhere, Srila Prabhupada wanted his books distributed to colleges, to libraries, to prominent citizens, and to the masses. By the end of 1974, Srila Prabhupada's disciples were ready to print Hindi and Bengali editions of Back to Godhead. When Srila Prabhupada heard that Western devotees in India were complaining of insufficient engagement, he replied, "I am pleased you are selling many Krishna books daily. All our men should go out with books." There is sufficient engagement. To his GBC secretary in India, he wrote, "Engage all of them in book distribution specifically, and take with you some Sankirtan party." Shri Shri Radha Parthasarthi ki jai, Shri Shri Gornatai ki, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ji ki jai. Continuing, almost finished here. What time is it? Another 15 minutes here? 8:30? Okay, let me just, one last paragraph. Without books, we'll make no progress in India. Srila Prabhupada had written to Tejas, his temple president in Delhi. Prabhupada had also trained his leaders in India in the strict policy of 50-50. Proceeds from life membership or any other collection should go 50% to the BBT and 50% to construction of other projects. On his order, the American BBT had been making donations of books to India, and by 1974 had donated $300,000 worth of literature. Although America was the leading pioneer in book printing and distribution, Prabhupada foresaw worldwide printing and distribution of his books, eventually to surpass that in the U.S. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.